I spent my childhood growing up between a small town called Alice Springs in the centre of Australia and the middle of the desert, and Innisfail, an even smaller town in far north Queensland on the coast of the Great Barrier Reef. I had an amazing childhood, filled with fun, family, and adventure. That's me in the pink shirt. But I also grew up with the belief that to make it in life, you had to leave. You head to the big city lights. And to give you some perspective, from Alice Springs, that was more than a 2-day drive in either direction. And several decades later, I meet far too many parents and children who hold that same belief. To succeed, you need to leave. And this, of course, fractures families and leads to the rural brain drain you may have heard of. And this trend is growing on a global level. According to the United Nations, in 1990, there were 10 megacities with 10 million or more people. By 2014, there were 28. And it is estimated that by 2030, there will be 41 megacities. I guess it isn't surprising. Big cities seem to be romanticised by society, and even Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Think Martin Scorsese's New York, New York, or even Nollywood's famous A Sophia in London, the tale of a Nigerian who inherits his late brother's fortune, acquired after he moved from their small village in Africa to make it big in London. The tale of someone moving from a small city or a small town to a big city to make it big in life, it has a certain magic to it. Well, at least it did for me. And it seems many others out there also. As the world's biggest cities, those with 500,000 people or more, they're predicted to keep growing with the megacities as more and more people want to live there. And this growth, it's attracting big investment in things like infrastructure and livability. And with all the talk about big cities, you would be forgiven for thinking that that's where it's all happening. But did you know that 75% of the world's population live in settlements of 500,000 people or less? And we produce 40% of the global GDP. Smaller cities, townships, and regions, we provide the critical infrastructure, manufacturing, and other logistical essentials that keep the world's biggest cities, like New York, Beijing, or in Australia, Sydney, functioning and growing. There has been much conversation about the opportunities and the benefits of big cities and megacities, most notably concerned with the economies of scale. One of the big draw cards cited throughout the literature is that big cities and megacities, they have the population base that supports jobs and economic growth. So what about regional cities and smaller areas? We often seem to be forgotten, with much of the conversation and the rhetoric supporting and perpetuating the big city-centric views, and pushing that thought that regional cities and smaller areas, that we're stuck in a cycle of low or no economic growth, and that they are not the place that you would want to be if you want a successful career. So what actually does happen if you live in a small city or a regional area? Are you making a second-rate investment and choosing a lesser career? I can tell you that at many points in my life, I've lost hours sleep over that exact topic. But what if it didn't have to be mutually exclusive? What if you could have a successful career from wherever you lived in the world? To be honest, I actually didn't think that was possible. So when it came time for me to make my first big career decision to head to university, come hell or high water, I was out of there. I was headed to a big city. But as fate would have it, at around about the same time that they were handing out university offers, my grandfather, who has been a huge part of my life, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And my family made the decision to relocate from Alice back to far north Queensland so that we could be nearer to them and provide family support. I had a decision to make: to go with my family and go to a regional university, or to head to the big city and pursue those big city dreams, I chose to stay. And in doing so, I honestly believed that I was giving up the opportunities that come with a big city. You know, the networks, the high-profile career, the success. And at key points throughout my life and career, I have made that same decision to stay over and over again. As I entered the workforce, as I started a family, and as I moved into senior management positions. And at each of those times, I suppressed a little voice inside that was telling me I was choosing something lesser. But I was trading it off for other things that I valued, like clean air and open spaces and an abundance of outdoor activities, more time with my family because I'm not commuting, and more money for holidays because housing is more affordable. Things that make me happy. Interestingly, happiness researchers the world over have looked into the factors that make people happy. A 2018 working paper published by the Canadian National Bureau of Economic Research found a strong correlation between population density and happiness. The population density in the 20% of most miserable communities was more than 8 times greater than in the happiest 20% of communities. And happiest people live in places with almost 90% less people per square mile, they have a shorter commute time, and they spend less of their income on housing. Sound familiar? But back to career success in regional areas. In my journey, I've found that actually it doesn't need to be mutually exclusive. In fact, many of my friends and colleagues who have successful careers cite the fact that they've lived in a smaller city or a regional remote area as the very reason for their career success. And in my own career, I have worked in executive positions on federal and state policies and projects. I've sat on national working groups. I've worked with business, industry, and government, and now in the higher education sector. And I've had the great fortune of being involved in an international leadership program that has seen me travel across Australia and throughout the United States, where I've had access to some of the world's leaders from government and industry. I have had opportunities and experiences, made networks and built friendships that small town kid from Alice, she couldn't have even imagined them. And most importantly, I'm happy. Now, I'm not saying that people living in big cities are unhappy, but what I am saying is that smaller cities and regional areas, they afford a lifestyle that may in fact make some people happier, especially if we start to think about regions and smaller cities differently. Smaller cities and regions, we're the economic backbone of the world's largest cities. And the opportunities for career success are growing as we've moved to a more global economy that has seen the introductions of things like virtual working teams working in virtual working spaces from all over the world. And the economics of these new working arrangements has demonstrated that they, when done well, can be more productive and reduce overhead costs. The fourth industrial revolution is creating that disruption in technology and thinking that is continuing the trend to a more innovative and technology-enabled way of operating, where people will be able to work from virtually anywhere. And while there's that city-centric thinking that suggests that big cities and megacities are the way to go because of economies of scale, there is also significant counter-evidence that suggests that a more dispersed population can in fact achieve huge economic benefits. For example, if we look at the Australian context, 30% of our population live in regional areas. And the Regional Australia Institute estimates that 50 billion Australian dollars is released into the economy for every 100,000 people that choose to live in a smaller city over a big city through avoided congestion and mortgage costs. Think about that. 100,000 people, $50 billion. And that's only the beginning. Smaller cities and regional areas and remote areas, There is so much more potential. And I believe that technology is providing the platform for people like you and I to have the benefits of big city living from wherever we choose to live. So for those of you who live in a smaller city or a region like me, let's think big. The opportunities are limited by our own imaginations. Or if the sound of affordable housing, clean, fresh air, open spaces, less commuting, alongside career success are your idea of happiness, why not come and join us? Thank you.